Todd McCauley is our next speaker. He's going to talk to you about how to plan for retirement income. And let me read his little blurb. Todd McCauley, he is a certified financial planner and I don't know this word, accredited investment fiduciary. And he's been working in financial services for more than 15 years. I know he looks like he's 21, but he's older. He's worked for companies like Fidelity Investments, John Hancock, Raymond James, and he offers free personal finance consultations to employees, retirees, and their spouses. So here's a couple things you might not know about Todd. Todd ran in the Boston Marathon in 2010, and he plans to finish this year. How was that? That was good? All right. He also, at one time, lived and owned a small organic farm. He worked an organic farm, and that was in Massachusetts. And before he moved here, he lost his dog. Not to death, but just the dog ran off. And Terry Knatzer tells me that he's a type A. And he just confirmed it when he was telling me about losing this dog because he, I guess, got in the newspaper, on the news, his phone use went up trying to find this dog, and he was driven. And he found it. So that's a good thing. So Todd, great guy. If you haven't met with him, you should. And he is going to talk to us about retirement income. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So Ann is a tough act to follow. I'm going to have to pick somebody different for my intro next time. But thank you, Ann. We are going to talk a little bit about retirement income today. I think, as Ann said, this is often one of the challenges that people face is how do they pay their bills in retirement? And when you're working, you have a salary. Hopefully that covers your expenses. When you're retired and your salary goes away, how do we cover our expenses now? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I think it's much easier than people make it out to be. Often the financial part of retirement has a way of taking care of itself with just a little bit of planning. So we're going to talk about that. As was said, I'm the Financial Wellbeing Officer here at UK. I started in UK in 2015 after 15 years in corporate finance and personal finance in corporate America, where I worked for big and small companies. So I've been talking to people now about retirement and investing and saving for about 20 years. Here at UK, I started the Financial Wellbeing Benefit, which is a benefit that's all about empowering you all, employees, faculty, staff, to improve your own financial well-being. We don't do it for people. So it's a lot like if you've met with one of the dietitians with Eat Well, or you've gone to one of the employee gyms and met with a Move Well employee. It's all about trying to help you improve your situation. So that's really what I think that we strive to do in financial well-being is empower you to improve your financial well-being. So we do that in 3 ways. One, we have online resources. There's a company we partnered with called Enrich that has an educational website where you won't get bombarded by ads, where you can learn about various financial topics. I do one-on-one consultations, as Ann mentioned, where I can sit down with you and go over your personal situation. We can do that one-on-one in person, or we can do it virtually. And then I also do group and departmental presentations. So if you go back to your departments, your subunits within this huge university, and you want a specific topic that's going to be covered in a team meeting, anywhere between 5 and 10 people, let me know. I can be there. I can cover any financial topic. So those are resources that we make available through Financial Wellbeing. So some people have this misconception that financial well-being is about eliminating financial stress or doing away with financial stress. That is not true, right? It's all about striking a balance between financial well-being and financial stress. I don't think it would be good, possible, or healthy really to eliminate all of our financial stress. Sometimes as the temperature gets colder, it's the financial stress that gets me out of bed in the morning, that gets me to work because I have things I want to provide for my family, right? So a little bit of financial stress can be motivating. Too much financial stress can be paralyzing, right? Now that we can check our balances from our phones at work, we can watch our check account balance, we can watch bills bounce from our checking account, we can watch them clear our checking account, all from the comfort of our desk at work, right? So it's about striking this balance between financial well-being and financial stress. This is from an advisor out of Utah called Carl. His name's Carl Richards. He draws these Venn diagrams to try to explain complex topics to his clients. So anytime you're making decisions that have a high degree of uncertainty, and either they are important decisions or you perceive them to be important decisions, that's inherently going to be stressful. So a little financial stress just comes with the territory. And I think that's especially the case when it comes to retirement, right? Because there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to retirement. That's part of it, right? And there's obviously important decisions that you'll be making in the last few years that you work and that transition to retirement, and then decisions that you'll make throughout retirement that may be stressful just because they're important and there's a high degree of uncertainty. I'm in my early 40s now, probably work for another 25 or 30 years. There's going to be 8 presidential election cycles between now and when I retire. So there's a lot of uncertainty there, right? No one knows exactly what's going to happen politically, economically, with the market, with tax rates. So you can get kind of fixated on all that uncertainty, or you can focus on what you can control. So my presentation today is all about trying to focus on what you can control when it comes to your finances as you transition to retirement. So these are just some of the uncertainties. Everybody's already thought of these. I'm not hopefully bringing any new information to people, but when it comes to retirement specifically, how long will I remain healthy? That's often tied to that second bullet point. How long can I work? Will Social focus today on what we can control? So where do you start when it comes to retirement? You start with what you know. Am I moving around too much? Am I like stepping on a cord or something? Okay. You start with what you know. You want to keep it simple. This isn't to insult anybody's intelligence, but as a fellow human being, we overcomplicate everything, right? I have 3 young kids, 2 dogs, a wife at home. Life is complicated. I'm an introvert. I can't wait until 7:30 at night when life is not complicated, everybody's asleep, and I can just relax, right? But you want to keep this as simple as possible when it comes to financial preparing for retirement. So you want to look at your income and your expenses. So people that have met with me before, people that have seen my presentation before, you know where this is going. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable. It's the dreaded B word. Anybody? Budget, there we go. Okay, so it's the budget, right? I joke with my wife that there are 2 words that I couldn't use in a conversation for the first 13 years we were married. We've been married 16 years now. One was diet and one was budget, right? If I started a conversation or if the conversation started to include one of those 2 words, it probably wasn't going to go well, right? Someone was going to get defensive. She's a spender, I'm a saver. You know, it's like oil and water. Not always, but sometimes. We can now talk about a budget. It took me 13 of those 16 years. I can now, in a healthy way, talk about a budget. I think it was my time here at UK regularly talking to employees about it that helped with that. But I stay away from diet still. Maybe I'll talk to the Eat Well dietitians and get some advice about that. So when it comes to your retirement budget, I think there's an important difference between a pre-retirement budget and a post-retirement budget that I encourage everybody to do. You want to divide your expenses between what's essential and what's discretionary. And I tell everybody that I talk to about budgeting that when I use the word essential, it may mean something different than what Americans in general think of when they think of essentials. When I think of essentials, I think of global essentials, things that people need around the world, no matter where they live. So you need housing, you need food, you need health care, transportation. Your transportation needs may go down when you retire if you're not commuting to and from work regularly anymore. And you're going to need to stay up with your debt payments, right? You're going to need to pay your minimums on your debt. It doesn't include Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. Those are not essential. It does not include an unlimited data package, right, on your cell phone. So there's a lot of things that we've been promoted to as needing, but if you think back 50 years to what people could live on, they didn't need a lot of the things that we surround ourselves with now. So global essentials when I talk about essentials. Not to say you can't spend money on those other things, but I want people to be honest with themselves and just put that in the discretionary column. And our discretionary spending varies just as much as we do, right? Because every person's unique. Every person's values are unique. The way that they spend their money should reflect those values. So discretionary expenses could be dining. You know, you see how I made a distinction between food. We need food to survive. We don't have to eat out to survive necessarily, right? I'm the cook in the family. I also do the dishes. So I love eating out because I don't have to cook or clean up afterwards. But if we did that all the time, we'd be broke, right? So I need to occasionally eat in. Travel, having a second home, entertainment, hobbies. I put saving in the discretionary expenses column because in retirement, a lot of your savings won't be necessary, right? You won't have as many long-term goals in retirement. You may still have short-term goals, but those would be discretionary. You don't necessarily have to save for those goals in retirement. I also encourage people to divide their income in retirement because there are different income sources in retirement. Like I said, pre-retirement, most of us have one salary. If we have a dual income household, maybe there's two salaries. Now people are doing these side gigs. Maybe you have an outside gig that you're doing. But in general, it's slightly less complicated on the income side of the equation pre-retirement. Post-retirement, you want to pay attention to guaranteed income sources. So you want to look at Social Security, annuities, and pensions. Then you have variable income that may come into play in retirement. You may have part-time work. You may have rental income if you have rental properties that you're getting income from. And then you're going to have withdrawals from your investment accounts. The withdrawals from the investment accounts we're going to spend quite a lot of time talking about because I find that there's a lot of folks that are wired to be savers and have done a great job of saving for retirement, and then I tell them to start taking the money out to spend it, and they look at me like I'm crazy, right? You've reached the goal. It's time to start spending the money to fund your retirement, right? So we're going to talk about how to take money out of those investment accounts. So our picture has gotten slightly more complicated, but this is as complicated as it's going to get, right? So we've got two puzzle pieces now on the income side, and we've got two puzzle pieces on the expenses side. So you want to make sure that your guaranteed income is going to cover your essential expenses, and your variable income would be where you draw on for those discretionary expenses. And the reason I say that is it's a much more comfortable way to retire, right? If you are dependent on the stock market to provide for your essentials, then it's going to be stressful, right? You're going to be checking the stock market way too often. You're going to look at those balances too much, and it's going to create a stressful situation. So as much as possible, I like to see people cover their essential expenses with their guaranteed income. So you want to look at, in your situation, where are you short, right? Do you need to increase your income, and in what side of the column do you need to increase it? Do you need to increase your guaranteed income, or do you need to increase your variable income? Do you need to decrease expenses, right? Do you need to decrease your essential expenses, or do you need to decrease your discretionary expenses? So we're going to go through each one of those four areas and talk about some kind of tricks of the trade, what you can do to improve the equation, so to speak, to balance the equation when it comes to your income and expenses in these different categories. So for guaranteed income, this is all about retirement stability, right? So it's like a three-legged stool. Right? You can sit on a one-legged stool, but it's not as sturdy as a stool with three legs, right? You can sit on a two-legged stool even, right? As long as your legs are still good, right, you can sit on it, but it's just not as sturdy. So Social Security, annuity, and pensions, those are the three guaranteed sources of income. Social Security, you just had a great presentation by Russ about Social Security. That's going to provide the essentials for many of us in retirement. That's going to provide for our essential needs. It may not just provide for everything we want to do, but it may provide for everything that we need to do in retirement. Pensions, here at UK, we don't have a pension. Honestly, whoever decided to move us out of the pension system here in Kentucky in the 70s was a genius. If I could find that person, I'd give them a big hug, because we're not dealing with a lot of the issues that our colleagues are in other state universities because of that choice that was made in the 70s. But you may have pensions from other jobs. You may be, I work with a lot of employees that are retirees from the state or have retired from KTRS and are back here working at UK. So a pension is another source of guaranteed income. The pension is only as good as the guarantor of the pension. Whoever is guaranteeing it is important. That's the most important thing when it comes to the pension. And then annuities. So we're going to spend some time talking about annuities. It's a much maligned financial product, but we can thank Susie Orman for that. She's done great things for other parts of the world financially, but when it comes to annuities, I think in the media especially, they've been painted with a broad brush. So we're going to talk about a certain type of annuities that I think is very, very important to success in retirement. So with Social Security, as Russ talked about a little bit today, really the planning part of Social Security is whether you're going to take it now or later, right? Do you take it right as soon as you retire? If you retire 62 or older, you'd be eligible to take it early at that point. Or should you wait? You can wait as long as 70. Each year that you wait, it's going to grow at 8% a year. So 8% growth in a guaranteed income stream for the rest of your life, that's not just like getting 8% on an investment, right? That's very, very powerful. And it's the best protection that all of us in this room have against outliving our money, against longevity, right? Is that Social Security is going to pay for the rest of our lives. There's a cost to taking it early, so if you take it early, you're not getting that 8% growth up to your full retirement age, and there's that bonus if you delay beyond full retirement age until 70, it continues to grow at 8% a year. And that's fractional as well, and I'm sure Russ talked about that, where each month that you wait, you're actually benefiting from a fraction of that 8% annual growth. So it can come down to a month-by-month decision at some point where maybe you've used other savings and you're trying to put off taking Social Security. Waiting as long as possible may make sense. So kind of so that was Social Security 101. The 201 on Social Security is that you can kind of hedge your bet, especially when there's two incomes in the household, two people that could collect Social Security based on their earnings record. You can have one spouse file at normal retirement age and the other spouse wait. Right? It's really the only planning strategy, if you want to call it a planning strategy, that's left with Social Security. And there used to be more complicated things that you could do with it. Now it's really about when do you file, and if both people should file at the same time, or if both people should wait, if one should wait, if one, that's really the only variable that you're playing with is when to take it. And it may make sense for the higher earner to wait if that's possible, right? Because you'll see this is just a split between that's $100,000 of income in the household, and if you can see where the person that earned $75,000 versus the person that earned $25,000, the growth from one year to the next is 8% of that higher amount. So you can see that the growth is much higher. You're seeing almost $1,500 or $1,300 worth of growth from 62 to 70 for the higher earner, and only $700 for the lower earner. So it may make sense for the person with lower earnings to file, and then the other person with higher earnings to wait. The other reason why this makes a lot of sense is the survivor benefit will be the higher of either benefit, right? So that makes sense as well, right? Whoever is the surviving spouse would collect the higher benefit for the rest of their life. So the higher earner waiting is helping both people in that calculation. So should I take an annuity? This is one of the most common questions that I get asked when I sit down with people before retirement, is they're wondering whether they should annuitize some of the money that they have. I want to start by talking a little bit about just annuities in general. When someone says annuities are bad, it's kind of like saying ice cream is bad, but going to Baskin-Robbins and seeing that there's 36 flavors of ice cream, right? There are many more than that, 36 types of annuities. There are hundreds of different types of annuities. So to say annuities are bad, I think it makes sense with our media environment where things have to be black or white, right? It has to be polarizing. It has to be either bad or good. It can't be in the middle. Right? But when it comes to annuities in retirement, the type of annuity we're talking about is a guaranteed income annuity. This is where another way that I describe it to people is it's almost like a private pension, right? Where the pension is guaranteed by whoever the employer was. The annuity is going to be guaranteed by whatever insurance company you buy the annuity from. So annuity is an insurance product. It's the reverse of a life insurance policy, if you think of it, right? So with a life insurance policy, you pay the monthly premium. Maybe you pay it annually, but you pay a premium, and then the lump sum goes to your beneficiaries when you die, right? This is the reverse. With the annuity, you give the insurance company a lump sum, and then they pay you the monthly amount until you die, right? So it's the flip of an insurance policy. In the way that an insurance policy is, I wouldn't call it a gamble or a wager, but it's the annuity company or the insurance company has actuaries who are even bigger money nerds than I am, that run the numbers and figure out the risks of all these different likelihoods of people passing away, right? So when the insurance company sells life insurance or they sell an annuity, they've priced in the likelihood of you dying, right? So if you buy an annuity and you haven't structured it correctly, and you die very shortly after buying that annuity, you're not going to benefit from that income stream. But the reverse is true with an insurance policy, right? So we all are comfortable making this wager with an insurance policy. If you pay just a few premiums on an insurance policy and then died, the insurance company lost that bet, right? They were planning on you paying that insurance premium for the rest of your life, and they expected you to live much longer than you did, but now they have to pay the lump sum, right? So that's one of the common questions I get asked with an annuity is what happens if I pass away shortly after doing it. So I think one of the reasons why people are anxious about annuitizing is that they think they have to do all or nothing. And that's rarely the recommendation from any insurance company or what I suggest that people do. So you want to annuitize based on how much you need. So you're going to do that calculation of you're going to take your guaranteed income from other sources, from Social Security and your pensions if you have any. You're going to subtract your essential expenses, and you're going to see if there's a gap there. If you need more guaranteed income, you're going to go to our friends at TIA or you're going to go to another insurance company and say, this is the amount of monthly income I need for the rest of my life to cover my essentials. They can work backwards from that monthly income amount and tell you what amount you need to give them as a lump sum to provide that income. Right? So you're not guessing. You're not just saying, oh, I think I'll do half of it. You know, it's not arbitrary. It's based on need. And so that's how I encourage everybody to decide on how much they may need to annuitize. With annuities, like I said, if you do life only, then whoever the annuitant is, whoever the person is that's got that income stream on their life expectancy, if they pass away, the income stream goes away. But you can also add period certain to this. So this is a couple years old, but the dollar amounts may be different now. But it's just showing you the difference between females and males because of the life expectancy difference. If a female of the same age as a male goes to get an annuity, the monthly payout is going to be lower for the female because life expectancy is longer, right? Because that monthly income is going to continue longer. But when you add period certain, like this is life with 10 years, you can see how that drops the income as well, right? So what that means is that if something were to happen to, you know, the 65-year-old male in those first 10 years of the annuity, that $502 would continue to be paid out on a monthly basis to a beneficiary, right? So it hedges the bet a little bit. It says, okay, I'm going to give you this lump sum, you're going to pay me a monthly amount, but if I pass away shortly after doing that, I know that some of this income is going to go to somebody else. So there are pros and cons to every financial decision. There are pros and cons to annuities. So the pro and the reason why you use them is that your essential income is going to be guaranteed and covered for life, right? Like that whatever they provide, again, this is just like with the pension, how I said it's really important to understand the employer or the government institution or whoever is guaranteeing the pension. It's important to understand what insurance company is guaranteeing your annuity because you need a strongly rated insurance company that is very creditworthy and that you know is going to be able to pay out on those annuity claims for years to come. So the pro is that your essential income is increased now because of this annuity and your essential expenses are going to be covered. The negative, as I've talked about a couple of times, is that lump sum really ceases to exist. The lump sum has been given to the insurance company. You can't get it back, right? You get it back as an income stream. But you can't use the lump sum in ways that you may have used a lump sum. You can't use the lump sum to make a big ticket purchase. You can't use the lump sum to give to your heirs. You know, if you think of the ways you would have used a lump sum investment, you no longer have access to that anymore. The other thing with annuities to watch for is they may not be inflation adjusted. So if we go back to this slide here, $500 now, if we started retirement now, is not going to buy you the same amount in 20, 25 years, 30 years when retirement ends, right? So if anybody has parents that they've helped retire and then go on with their retirement, they always think everything's ridiculously expensive by the time they're late in retirement because they've anchored to prices from when they last worked, which may have been 25 or 30 years ago, and prices may have doubled, right? So you want to make sure that with your annuity, if it's covering a substantial portion of your essential, or if that annuity makes up an essential, or excuse me, if that annuity makes up a substantial amount of your guaranteed income, I would suggest you get an inflation rider on that. You know, and the inflation rider is going to say similar to Social Security, what's indexed for the CPI, the Consumer Purchasing Index. Same thing with an annuity, right? You can get an annuity that's going to be indexed for inflation so that as you get older and if inflation takes a bite out of your purchasing power, that income from the annuity will go up. Right? So we talked a little bit about guaranteed income from those three sources, how to cover the gap there. We're going to talk about variable income as well. So the biggest financial part of most individuals' retirement income is the withdrawals from retirement accounts, right? So like I said, we've been saving for years potentially for retirement. Now it's time to start taking the money out. So what does that look like? Do you take all the money at once or do you take it gradually, right? Most people are going to take it gradually because if you took it all at once, you're going to throw yourself into a pretty high tax bracket and there's no reason to take it out until you need it or until the IRS requires you to start taking it out. And we're going to talk about that as well. So it really depends on your situation, whether you take it a big chunk at once or if you take it out gradually. So why would you take a lump sum? It makes sense in most cases for people to leave the bulk of their assets in our retirement plans. There's some specific Kentucky state income tax rules that apply to that, where folks that have worked at UK for a long time may be able to exclude more of the income from our plan from their taxable income here in Kentucky. Also, our plan costs are very low because we have a $4.5 billion retirement plan. We're able to negotiate with Fidelity and TIA and bring the cost down for all of us. Right? If you go out on your own to an advisor, if you take money out of our plans and move elsewhere, now you've got your money to negotiate with that one advisor about what the fees are going to be. So you're not going to have the same amount of leverage that we have here. So it's not uncommon to see costs go up tenfold if somebody leaves our plan and goes to an outside advisor. Not to say that that's not a decision some people make, but you just have to understand the cost side of that equation so that you can adequately make sure that you're seeing a value from those additional costs. There are circumstances where you may want to take out a large amount, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Actually, not next. We'll talk about that later. There may be circumstances where you may want to take out a chunk just to accomplish a specific goal, but again, you're going to want to keep the bulk of the assets in the retirement plan, in my opinion. So folks may have heard of required minimum distributions or minimum required distributions. You'll sometimes see the acronym written two different ways. These are the distributions that the IRS requires all of us to make when we reach the age of 70 and a half from pre-tax retirement accounts. So traditional IRAs, 403Bs, 401Ks, anything that's pre-tax. If you're no longer working and you've reached the age of 70 and a half, you're required to start taking the money out. Right? And this is the IRS's way of saying, okay, enough is enough. We want some tax revenue from this money that you've been saving for years. We need to start getting some income from this. So you divide the balance, the year-end balance from the previous year, by a factor. And that factor gradually gets smaller because you're aging. That factor is based on your life expectancy. So you're gradually dividing by a smaller number. So as any of the math majors will tell you in the room, if you divide by a smaller number, you're going to take out a higher percentage. Right? So it starts around 4%, and then it's gradually going to increase over your life. I think if you get to like 100 or 110, you're dividing by 2. So you're taking out like half the balance, right? So it starts at like 25 or 26. So you're taking out about 4%, and then it's gradually going up. They can require you to take the money out. I might have to convince my wife of this. They can't require you to spend it, right? You just have to take it out of the pre-tax account, right? It just has to get out. They have to get the tax revenue. I'm sorry, I get too close to that. Everyone hear the echo? Okay. So you want to make sure that you know you have to take it out, but you don't have to spend it, right? You're going to pay the taxes on it. You can reinvest it in a taxable investment account if you want to. Another way that you can take money out of these retirement accounts is you can take interest only, right? You can take or the earnings of whatever the account generates. So if you have $100,000, it makes 10%, you take out the $10,000. The pro is that you're leaving the principal intact. So if you want to leave a legacy or you want to make sure that you're not eating away at that principal, that's an advantage. But as you can see, the biggest con to this is that it has to have earnings, right? So in a year that if you're using this method and the stock market goes down in a year, you might not have any earnings, and that means you're not taking any money out of the account. Right? So again, this is why it's really important that this variable income covers discretionary spending, not essential spending, right? Because if you do have a bad stock market year and you're using this method, you still want to be able to keep the lights on, right? But this could be used if you want to just make sure that the principal stays intact and you take out the earnings each year and you spend that money instead. The most common way, I think, to take this is to meet with TIA or Fidelity and talk to either one of them about what a sustainable percentage is. So this is the percentage that their tools and industry tools show you can safely take out every year of your life and not run out of money. So there's obviously some assumptions being made when you calculate this percentage. There's some assumptions about life expectancy. There's some assumptions about the return of the portfolio. There's some assumptions about what the stock market's going to do from year to year. Also, interest rates play a really important role in this, because when I started in the industry 20 years ago, the sustainable percentage was around 6%. But over the last 20 years, people are living longer and interest rates have gone down. So now sustainable percentage, most advisors will tell you, is around 4% a year. So really easy math. If you've got $1 million in the account, you should be able to take out about $40,000 a year, index that amount for inflation. So it's going to be a little bit higher each year after that, and safely not run out of money. Right? So the disadvantage to calculating your sustainable withdrawals this way is that timing is everything. And what I mean by that is that if you just so happen to pick the absolute worst year to retire and the market goes down 20%, your sustainable withdrawals are going to take a big hit, right? The amount of money you can safely take out of that account is not going to be nearly as high as if the market hadn't had that correction. And you can find presentations online. I can send you material. It's actually, I find it really interesting because I'm a money and math nerd. But if you change the sequence of returns and make it, best returns early and worst returns later, everyone has tons of money left over. And if you flip it around and you put all the worst years early and have all the best years later, we all run out of money, right? So timing is really important when it comes to this. So this is where I think it's really important to stay in touch with Fidelity and TIA even after you retire. Meet with them regularly and recalculate what is sustainable. Because also as your health changes, your life expectancy may change. Right? I usually encourage people to start with the life expectancy of their parents, but think of what specifically, if your parents passed away, especially if they passed away early, think about if what they passed away from, people are still passing away from now. And what I mean by that is, my own family, a personal example, my grandmother had a massive heart attack that 20 years ago would have killed people. Right? There would have been zero life expectancy after that. But she lived for 15 years after that heart attack. So there's advances in medicine that mean that just looking at your genetics may not be enough. You also need to adjust that for advances in medicine. But you start with that, and then you update these calculations with Fidelity as you go through retirement. Each year or 2 years, or with Fidelity or TIA, you update these calculations and you update the life expectancy. And you figure out, okay, is what I'm taking still sustainable? Is this still an amount that I can safely take out and not run out of money? So a quick tip for taking money out of a retirement account. This makes it a little bit less stressful, I think, because you're less concerned with the market and what the market's doing. Some of your money should always be invested in stocks, in my opinion, because stocks are one of the best protections we have against inflation. And if you're going to live for 20 or 30 years in retirement, inflation is going to take a bite out of your retirement income. So it's important to have something invested for growth. But I wouldn't want what I'm going to rely on for the next year of income to be invested in the stock market, right? Because then I'm going to be worried about it. I'm going to be watching it too much. So if you try to take about a year's worth of income and leave it in cash, and then if that's that sustainable withdrawal, it would be only about 4% of the portfolio. And then you use that as the cash allocation in your portfolio. So if you're looking at asset allocation 101, stocks, bonds, and cash, the percentage you have in each of those is going to determine most of your return. So you use that, what you're going to take for withdrawals makes up the cash amount of your portfolio, and then you allocate the rest of the account between stocks and bonds, and then you rebalance as you use the cash. So at the beginning of the year, you're going to have, if we're using that sustainable withdrawal amount, 4% in cash. As the year goes on and you're gradually taking the money out of that cash account, at the end of the year, you've got 0% in cash because you've spent it. You've taken it out. So you just rebalance. Just reallocate the portfolio, get 4% back into cash, and then go on through the next year. It's a much less stressful way to handle the distribution phase. So we've talked about guaranteed and variable income. We're going to talk a little bit about expenses, but like I said, this was a retirement income planning presentation, so we did spend the bulk of the time talking about various forms of income, both guaranteed and variable, coming out of your investment accounts once you retire. When it comes to essential expenses, the most common question I get is, what can I do about my house? You know, if you don't have a house that's paid off, then that's a big expense to carry into that essential column into retirement. So you could consider downsizing. You know, maybe it's the house that you raise kids in and you don't need the space that you have anymore. So you could move to a much less expensive house and be just fine in retirement. What you would love, well, you can ask my wife how exciting it is to be married to me, because I'm already planning for downsizing. And our kids are 12, 9, and 7, right? So that's when you're wired to be a type A planner, you create plans that are just way too detailed, way too early. But it's a popular thing to do, right? I want to downsize as soon as they leave the house for college. Like as soon as they're out, one less bedroom. Let's just get a different house. You can lower your healthcare costs. So there's a couple of ways to do this. Obviously, staying at UK until you're eligible to retire, so you can take advantage of the retiree healthcare credit that we offer. That's one great way to lower your healthcare costs. But honestly, the best way to lower your healthcare costs is stay healthy, right? So rely on, while you're still here at UK and when you're retired, rely on the resources that exist to help you stay healthy. Meet with the dietitians that we have through Eat Well. Go to the gym with Move Well folks. So this is the biggest place that I think you can, one of the ways that people don't think that's retirement advice, but it is, right? So staying healthy is one of the most impactful things that you can do to lower those healthcare costs. And then you can pay down debt. Like I said, in that essential column, I had the minimums on debt. So if you have debt that you can pay off before you retire, then it will lower your essential expenses. The big one there is housing, right? If you can pay off your house before you retire, then not always, but in most cases, Social Security is going to be plenty of essential income for you, or guaranteed income for you to have. So when it comes to paying down debt, it's important to look at how far away you are from retirement, how much time it will take to pay off that debt, and then what the cash flow result will be, right? So you know what the monthly debt payment is. If you pay it off, that debt payment goes away. So it's really easy to quantify kind of that side of it, to say, okay, if I've got a mortgage that's $1,000 and I pay off my house, that $1,000 is no longer in the essential expense column, right? So you can see right away what the cash flow impact would be. And you can compare that cash flow impact to the cash flow impact of saving more in your retirement account and what that's going to impact when it comes to your income in retirement. So in this example, if we were saving $1,000 each year and it earned 7% a year, we could either pay extra towards our mortgage with that $1,000 and pay off our house, or we could invest it for retirement. So here's what the numbers look like. So if you can see that the most important line in this whole thing, in my opinion, is that monthly income amount at the bottom, right? So if we saved that $1,000 a year for 5 years, it's only going to grow to $6,153, right, at 7% a year. If we take 4% of that, that's going to provide us another $246 of income. And if we divide that by 12, it's only going to be $20 a month, right? So if you're really close to retirement, investing it isn't going to impact your cash flow. Unless your house payment is less than $20 a month, which great for you, it's not going to be the same as just eliminating that house payment, right? So if you're close, this is often where when I sit down with somebody that's 5 years from retirement, they say, yes, you could save more into your retirement plan, but if you can pay off your house, that's going to impact your cash flow a lot more than saving for just those 5 years. But if you go back to somebody that's in their 20s saving for retirement, then if they invest that $1,000 for 40 years, it grows to $213,000, and that's $712 a month in extra income. So you can see that the time frame until retirement makes all the difference here. So at this point, I would say, just by virtue of the fact that you're at this conference, I'd say you're closer to the 5 years than you are to the 40 years to retirement, right? So at this point, it may make sense to start paying off some debt. So discretionary spending, I don't like to sit down with people and tell them that they need to spend less money despite what my wife will tell you about my budgeting process. That's not what I like to do. I don't like to be the bad guy and just say, hey, we need to spend less, right? But you may need to spend less either pre-retirement just to reach your goals, and you may need to spend less in retirement so that you don't run out of money, right? Because no one knows exactly how long they're going to live. Whenever you do the life expectancy calculations, half the people get there and half the people go past it, right? So you want to understand that it may mean some years that you need to tighten your belt a little bit. So even when I'm working with someone on a pre-retirement budget, I'll encourage them to rank their discretionary spending from what they spend the most on to what they spend the least on. So with essentials, most of us are pretty similar, right? We spend the most on our housing, food is usually second, transportation is usually third. Those are usually the top three for most of us pre-retirement in the essential column, right? Discretionary, all bets are off. Everybody's different. Everybody needs to prioritize their own spending based on their values. So I encourage people, again, to sort it from what you spend the least on, or what you spend the most on, to what you spend the least on, and then see if that lines up with your values. If you showed somebody that list that didn't know you at all, what would they say is important to you? Right? That same advisor that draws the Venn diagrams tells his clients, show me your calendar and your checkbook, and I'll tell you what's important to you. The way you're spending your two most precious resources, your time and your money, that reflects, and it should reflect your values. It doesn't always do that, but it is much more comfortable if it does. So if you need to adjust your discretionary spending, cut from those categories that maybe have made it too far up your list, right? Don't cut from your favorite thing. Don't make yourself miserable, right? If travel and going on that vacation once a year is the most important thing to you, then don't cut from that. Cut from some of the other categories as much as you can to make sure that you're not overspending in the discretionary side. So that's what I have for retirement income planning for you today. You can ask anybody that's come and met with me that if you come into my office and you ask me if you have enough money to retire, I'm probably going to ask you for your budget, right? So don't be disappointed. If you need to do some work ahead of time, that's fine. If you need to do some work after our appointment to kind of fine-tune the budget, that's another option as well, and we can do a follow-up appointment. But I honestly think that a good budget and a good budgeting process is the most important retirement planning tool that you have. And it's something that everybody can do. It's not nearly as complicated as a lot of the other retirement tools that you'll see out there, but it's, I think, the most important. You want to look at your income sources between the guaranteed and the variable income sources and make sure that you've got a good balance there, and then you want to look at your expenses. There's my email and my phone number. If you want to schedule an appointment with me, if you send me an email, that's the best way to do it. I can just respond with the appointment link that I use. I use an online scheduler. If you go to my online scheduler, my first available appointment right now is February, but you can shorten the length of the appointment, or you can look for a virtual meeting and we can find one sooner. If you need to meet with me because you're going to retire before February, don't raise your hand, but you can email me back and say, hey, I couldn't find an appointment when I need it. I don't give the scheduler my entire calendar, or I wouldn't have a moment to breathe. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I think we've got some mics around the room. Just raise your hand if you have a specific question and we can get those. There we go, right up here.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is
welcome.
Terry, and I'm wondering if you have a particular app that you like for budgeting. Because I saw one the other day. I thought this was pretty cool, and but it's a little more complicated to kind of instantly put information into to know whether and to categorize it. Okay.
So the question was if I have a favorite app. I'll dodge the question a little bit and say my favorite thing for budgeting is Microsoft Excel. So I start with an Excel spreadsheet. If Excel spreadsheets make you nervous just saying the word, then you can do it on a piece of paper, but I like Excel to start with. But then the app I like for monitoring your budget throughout the month is Mint. Mint is a part of the Intuit family, so if you're familiar with TurboTax or QuickBooks, they are a big financial software firm. Mint, so the pros and cons about Mint is it's free. The negative is then there's ads on the website, so you kind of have to dismiss all the credit card ads. But what I usually encourage people to do when I'm helping with the budget process, and I help with people of all ages with the budgeting process, the good thing about it is it doesn't change, right? It's the same for 20-year-olds and for 60-year-olds preparing to retire. You want to come up with a plan before the month starts so that you can be intentional about how you spend your money. So that's what I use the Excel spreadsheet for. I used to categorize every expense and have hundreds of expenses that then I would try to monitor throughout the month. I would sit down with my wife and go through all these categories, and she'd say, what am I supposed to do with this information, right? So I don't put 100 categories into Mint now and try to monitor all of those. What I do is pick the 2 or 3 that I know we need to keep an eye on, and that's what I use Mint for budgeting throughout the month. Yeah, follow-up question? Yeah.
So I have a friend who uses one.
Mhm.
He goes out to eat. As soon as he gets through eating, he opens up the app, puts it in, and he pushes a button, and it's done.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to go back home and do anything else but keep the receipt.
Right.
But I don't remember which it was, but I thought you might have one that would be easy to use and categorize in that way.
Right. So the follow-up question was an app that you can easily enter things in so you don't have to do any extra work once you get home. I like Mint because you can sync your credit cards to it, and because it's from such a big software company, I'm relatively comfortable with that. I mean, I think we all know at this point that anything online can be hacked, but I think that Intuit as a company that runs TurboTax has invested plenty in security. So what you do with Mint is you link all the accounts that you're spending money from to that website. And then as you're spending money on debit cards or credit cards, it automatically is tracking that and categorizing it for you, right? So every once in a while you find humorous miscategorizations, like Caramanda's Cupcakes looks like Ramada in the middle of the name, so it says it's hotels. I wish it was hotels instead of well, I don't wish it was hotels, but I mean, I don't spend that much on it that it looks like it's a hotel, but it's, anyway, so you find little idiosyncrasies about those things that automatically categorize things and take the work of it out for you. But like I said, as long as you're really trying to keep track of a small number of categories, like eating out is a common one, right? Like for our family, if we can keep track of personal care stuff, clothing, and eating out, then we're doing a pretty good job. You know, we have 3 young kids, like I said. No one's going to go on a spontaneous road trip and spend a lot of gas money. You know, no one's going to buy a bunch of extra stuff for the house, at least not in our family, right? So you kind of, once you track it, you figure out which categories you need to keep an eye on. And that's what I use a tool like Mint for. Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much for your time.